Infrastructure. Question 5 has been withdrawn. I call Andrew McMurray.
Mr. Speaker, question number 1.
Minister.
Under the current funding model, my department fully funded NI Water for the first 3 years of the current price control to the level as deemed necessary by the utility regulator. We all recognise that there is a need for additional funding for all public services, and NI Water is not immune to this. Water and sewerage infrastructure has suffered from years of historic underinvestment as a result of the austerity policies implemented by the British Government, and we are dealing with the legacy of this. During this financial year, my department provided NI Water with a budget allocation of almost €0.5 billion, which is just under 40% of the total non-ring-fence budget available for my entire department. Furthermore, from the recent October monitoring round, my predecessor provided NI Water with an additional £32 million of public money, of which £19.5 million was to fund targeted action to release wastewater constraints. I will be continuing with my department's three-pronged approach in partnership with the Executive by continuing to work with Executive colleagues to try and increase wastewater investment, by reviewing the policy and legislation around developer contributions with a view to bringing forward a consultation later this month, and in securing Executive agreement for the Water Flooding and Sustainable Drainage Bill to be introduced to the Assembly. My department has reviewed water utility company structures across Britain and Ireland for best practice, including mutualisation, which I know the member will be interested in. However, the privatisation and mutualisation models favoured in England and Wales require charges to be paid by domestic water customers, so are essentially water charges by the back door. Furthermore, recent evidence has demonstrated that these governance models do not necessarily provide the better levels of services people expect and can lead to higher levels of debt and increasing costs. I am keen to see the delivery of improvements to our wastewater infrastructure to facilitate housing growth and economic development, as well as helping to improve water quality. And I will continue to work in partnership with NI Water to ensure that we make the most of the funding we have available to us for essential public services, and I will work alongside my Executive colleagues also.
Andrew McMurray.
Thank you, Minister. And I think the Minister and I agree on some of the overarching themes here. But again, the Minister references mutualisation and privatisation. But would the Minister accept that that mutualisation, which is about community ownership, and privatisation is a different financial model?
Minister.
Well, mutualisation essentially will result in the executive oversight being relinquished, and that in itself is concerning, given that we have seen examples across the water where this hasn't worked well. To achieve mutualisation, this would require charges to be paid by domestic water customers, and I think there's no ambiguity around that. Because NI Water would also be required to secure debt and financing at quite a significant scale. So in order to do that, they will require to borrow large amounts of money, which would have to be financed in some way. So for me, I feel that it's just another way of dressing up the introduction of water charges to domestic customers, and I'm committed to ensuring that we don't add an additional pressure financially to people here who are already struggling with cost of living and everything else that we are hearing about day and daily.
Boylan.
And could I welcome the Minister for first question time? Minister, just for clarity, because there seems to be some confusion over this, could you clearly explain why you believe mutualisation leads to water charges per million watt?
Minister.
Well, as I've said, I believe that mutualisation is essentially water charges by the back door. And again, this would require the relinquishment of oversight by the Executive, which I think is not the way that we want to go. We want to ensure that we have that level of governance in relation to how our water is treated and how our wastewater system is working. So for me, I don't think it's a positive option. We've seen how this hasn't worked well across the water, and I want to ensure that we are able to continue to provide the highest standards of wastewater infrastructure, while also ensuring that we are not adding additional costs to domestic customers.
Timothy Gillespie.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Minister, your counterpart, the Minister for Communities, has announced 100,000 new houses by 2039, and the programme for government committed to 5,850 new social houses being started by 2027. The current wastewater infrastructure doesn't support these developments. What conversations do you have with the Minister for Communities, and have you given him a commitment that you will support him through funding of Northern Ireland Water to ensure he can provide the houses that he has outlined in these announcements?
Well, I thank the member for his question, and I think it's important to outline that within the programme for government, our wastewater infrastructure underpins quite a lot of the priorities there. So there's a commitment not just by myself as the Minister, but right across the Executive to deliver on these priorities. So as I have said in my previous answers, I will continue to work on my three-pronged approach, which is working closely with all executive colleagues to deliver the funding needed. The reality is, as the member will know, the overall executive budget would still not be enough to deliver the wastewater upgrades that is required. So, however, that does not mean that we do nothing. And I'll continue to work in the best of my ability with all executive colleagues to ensure we can do as much as we can to deliver on our wastewater infrastructure, to ensure that the homes that we have committed to build are built at the earliest possible stage.
Andy Allen.
Minister, in a recent engagement with the Communities Committee on Housing, Northern Ireland Water highlighted a requirement of $1.8 billion in funding, which has been highlighted repeatedly, but there's no funding for that. At what stage will the Department for Infrastructure accept that the current funding model really isn't working? Minister.
Well, I don't believe that the current funding model isn't working. I think that the problem is that we don't have enough funding. I've given previous answers today in relation to some of the options that members have put forward around mutualisation, privatisation, and I think there's a concerted effort to try and push us in the direction to implement water charges. That will not be happening, and I'm committed not to do that. And the member shaking his head, I'm not suggesting that that is what you're saying, just to make that clear, but what I am saying is that I am looking at all other options available to us. And that means, and things have been done, and I think I'd also mentioned in relation to the October monitoring round, 19.5 million was provided in that monitoring round by my predecessor, John O'Dowd, which helped to ensure unlocking capacity, which will build 2,300 homes. So when we put our heads together, this can happen, and I will continue to do that, working with all colleagues around the table.
Done.
Given the severe impact of the current water capacity crisis on both domestic and commercial development and our ever-growing housing waiting lists, what other innovative engineering solutions are being under consideration, and is best practice being fully explored right across the world to try and solve this crisis, which is not a new issue?
Minister.
I thank the member for his question, and I think today the Finance Minister has announced the funding allocation through the Transformation Fund, which includes 15 million towards the urban drainage. So for me, that's one way of looking at the innovation that is available to us in terms of how we treat our rainwater, which, as NI Water have also said, forms a large part of the water coming through our treatment systems. At committee last week, we had a discussion around looking at global practice, and I think that's something that we are committed to do, to look at best practice, not just across these islands, but across Europe and indeed globally. So, as I said at committee last week, I rule nothing in and rule nothing out. However, I think it's important to recognise that we do have a good funding model. We have options on the table that we're considering and working through at the minute in terms of the three-pronged approach, and we'll continue to look at all other potential options to us that can help to deliver in terms of our wastewater.
Mark Durgan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank the Minister for her answers thus far. The Minister says she's not ruling anything in or ruling anything out, but has she in effect ruled out the expert-led review recommended by the Audit Office into the funding and governance of Northern Ireland Water? She has said to us she doesn't believe that there's anything wrong with the funding model. I share her concerns around some solutions being mooted by others. But if there's nothing wrong with the funding model, is the Minister confident that the governance of Northern Ireland Water is everything it should be?
Minister.
Well, as we had a discussion in committee last week also, and we talked about the NI Audit Office report, which was published last year, the Department has already undertaken 6 reviews in relation to funding and the status of NI Water. So within all of that, we have still come to the conclusion that the existing funding model is the best one to continue with. The outcome of this work is a choice for this Assembly to consider whether they want to change the NI Water's form or funding model, but that will require the introduction of domestic water charging. No matter how many times we talk about this, that is the ultimate outcome if we want to do that. But I suppose what I'm saying is we look at all of the suggestions being put forward. My priority is to ensure that we're not putting additional burden on hard-working families and people right across the north who are already struggling with the cost of living. However, we need to find sustainable solutions to that. So take on board what the member has said, but I think it is important that any changes, and I think the other point in relation to changing the funding model or changing how we are currently operating, that will require further delays in terms of progressing our wastewater infrastructure. So at this point in time, I am committed to doing as much as we can. That may require doing things in a phased approach based on the funding available to me, but I'll make sure that I continue to work with all partners, including NI Water, to ensure that when more money comes available, we're ready to use it.
Mr. Sheehan's not in this place. I call Philip McGuigan.
Cast Everett 3, question 3.
Minister.
It's important to note that the majority of housing developments pass through the various processes of planning, consents, construction and adoption with relatively few issues. Departmental data indicates that over 92% of all housing developments are adopted without the need to engage in enforcement action or the development added to the list of unadopted sites. However, I fully recognise that there is a significant number of developments which are not completed to the correct standard and remain unadopted. A number of measures have been put in place by my department over recent years to increase the effectiveness of enforcement. And following approval by my predecessor, Minister O'Dowd, bond calculation rates were raised in 2023 to ensure that bonds would be sufficient to complete construction works should a developer default, and this represented the first rise since 2008. In addition, following the 2024 Assembly motion tackling the high number of unadopted housing developments and roads, a commitment was given to develop a more effective private streets enforcement guidance to reduce the risk of new developments being added to the backlog of unadopted sites. And I am currently reviewing this guidance and have met with officials in recent days to discuss this and consider our next steps, and hope to be able to make an announcement very soon.
Mr. McGuigan.
Thank you, and I thank the Minister for that response. Can I just add further to that, if she can outline what DFI's legislative responsibility for adoption of developments is?
Minister.
Well, I think that's an important point, and just to clarify then for the record, because in my view this is a developer's responsibility where a developer does default. They have been paid for the houses that have been built or the properties that have been built. But in terms of my department's responsibility, the statutory basis for the adoption of private streets is provided within the Private Streets NI Order 1980 and the Private Streets Amendment Order 1992. The Private Streets Order requires developers to take out a bond surety, which is a financial guarantee that the developer will meet their obligations, or if the developer defaults, the authority may draw down the bond in order to have the works completed to the required standards. Where a developer has defaulted on their agreements, either by leaving a site incomplete or the company ceasing to trade, my department has a discretionary option to commence enforcement by issuing notices under the relevant legislation and using the bond monies to complete the works necessary to bring the infrastructure to the required standard. If the value of the work necessary to bring a development to an adoptable standard exceeds the value of the bond held, then my department has no legal requirement to complete this work and no funding mechanism to bridge this gap. And unfortunately, unless alternative funding can be identified, the development will remain unadopted.
Briskin.
Mr. Speaker, I welcome the Minister to her first question time today. I want to declare an interest, as I am somebody who lives in an unadopted development. The Minister will be aware that I am hoping to bring forward a private member's bill on this particular issue, but it doesn't seem to be that there is any deterrent for developers who continually build and leave homeowners in a state where the infrastructure outside their door is in very poor condition. Homeowners are left in a merry-go-round situation where it's a back and forth between DFI developer. So can the Minister confirm, has there been any enforcement action that has been taken out against developers who have created this situation even in the last 5 years?
Minister.
Yeah, well, I thank the member, and I completely appreciate their frustration, and I know this is something that has come up in many areas, and I suppose it's just to reiterate that point that, you know, essentially the department's hands are tied in relation to this. This is the responsibility of developers who sold houses. People buy them in good faith, expecting that they will be finished. So it's a very difficult situation. I appreciate that and really have a lot of empathy for all those people who are impacted in relation to this. Since 2021, enforcement action has been initiated by my department on approximately 28 sites. The number of enforcement actions is restricted by several factors, including department and contractor resource and a shortfall of funds remaining in the bond. But as I've previously mentioned, I'm currently considering new private streets enforcement guidance, which may influence how and when enforcement action is taken in the future against developments, and hope to be able to update the House fairly soon.
Minister, to your place. Minister, you talk about the legislative responsibility you've got regarding bonds. One of the biggest frustrations I face when I'm representing the hundreds of people in East Antrim that live on adopted roads is the ability to call down that bond. One development in my constituency was abandoned by the developer over 15 years ago, and that bond has still not been accessed, despite your department having the legislative resources to do so. Why is it such a bureaucratic and long and drawn-out process for these people to finally get the works done in those areas?
Minister.
Well, I thank the member for that question. I think that in itself, it demonstrates just how challenging this issue is, and that is why I have committed to reviewing the guidance and hopefully update it so that that makes it more streamlined and actually clearly shows what we can do within our remit to try and bring these issues to a resolution at the earliest possible stage. So I think that that has been recognised, and that is why we're on the we're place we are, and hope to be able to provide further information fairly soon.
David Honeyford.
Speaker, and welcome the Minister to place. In Lagan Valley, and all of us could have examples of this, but in Lagan Valley, residents of Ayrshire have lived in their homes for years, yet DFI have recently reported that technical designs aren't even done, are submitted, and residents are left living frustrated with the roads unfinished. Will any new guidance that you bring forward be applied retrospectively? And if not, why not? Surely DFI has got to be way stronger before houses are even occupied at the start.
Well, I think at this point it would be remiss of me not to preempt what will come out of the review that we're currently looking at, but I will hope to be able to provide the member with further update at the earliest possible stage.
Michelle Guy.
Please.
Minister.
I can confirm that TransLink received funding through the Department of Transport Union Connectivity Fund to undertake a feasibility study regarding the reopening of the railway line between Lisburn and Antrim. As well as considering engineering requirements, demand forecasting and cost estimates, the study is considering reopening the 3 stations previously in operation on this line at Ballinderry, Glenavy and Crumlin. In addition, 3 locations for a new station at Belfast International Airport are also being appraised to identify the preferred option. The report is due to be completed in spring 2025, so hopefully in the next few weeks, and I look forward to reviewing its recommendations on how to improve connectivity across our island.
Mrs. Guy.
Thank you to the Minister for her answer. I just want to ask if there has been any budget bids from her department to the fund on the delivery of the Knockmore line, which includes that link to the Belfast International Airport.
If we could just maybe come back to the Minister or the member in writing, as I'm not aware of any just from I've come into post, but I can double check that with the department and come back to you in writing. Thank you.
Colm Gildernew.
Gargus ar do céad trá ceisna agus aimór idir Rolua Ira. Can you update us in relation to the development of projects proposed under the All-Ireland Rail Review?
Minister.
Colm, my department continues to work with our colleagues in the Department of Transport, supported by the European Investment Bank, to consider the recommendations in the review and identify those rail interventions which could be well advanced or delivered over the next decade to 2035. Already, rail services on the island are being developed towards the report's vision, and this includes an increase in the hourly train service between Dublin and Belfast, while procurement has also started on a new, faster, more sustainable enterprise train fleet for the Dublin-Belfast route, and we hope to see that in place by 2029. In addition to the reopening of the Knockmore line, TransLink has a number of other feasibility studies ongoing, linked to recommendations in the rail review, which are due to report by spring-summer this year. I will then need to consider which projects to prioritise as funding opportunities become available, and the outcomes from the EIB work and the ongoing feasibility studies will help inform this. And just last week I attended my first NSMC meeting and was delighted to meet with my counterpart in the South, Minister O'Brien, and this was an issue that was very high on the agenda, and I look forward to continuing that work with my colleagues in the South moving forward.
Donald Buckley.
The Minister will know there's a lot of excitement right across Northern Ireland about the potential of the reopening of old lines. In particular, the one that will be well known to her, as it is me in terms of constituency, is that Portadown to Armagh railway line. Could I ask the Minister, in following on from the previous question, what will be the engagement with local communities whenever the Department takes the decision whether or not to advance any particular line?
Minister.
Well, yeah, I am very aware of that line in particular, given that it links even through my own constituency as well. In terms of all of these projects, engagement and consultation with communities are critical. So while we wait the outcome of the feasibility studies, what that consultation will look like, we will be considering in the next step. So hope to see further progress on that in the very near future.
Justin McNulty.
Minister, the Minister's Department deserves huge credit in terms of the early enterprise service between Belfast and Dublin. It's a game changer in terms of public transport, so well done. Minister, please give us an update on the reopening of the Armagh-Portadown line, please.
I thank the member for his comments, and I know that the enterprise service that he alludes to has actually been highly successful. I think we've seen a 49% increase in passengers using that, which is a success story in itself for public transport. In terms of the Portadown to Armagh line, with an onward connection to Mullingar, this was identified as a medium-term intervention in the All-Ireland Strategic Rail Review in support of the recommendation to develop the railway to boost connectivity in the North Midlands. This feasibility study, which builds on an initial study funded by the Department and carried out by Armagh, Banbridge and Craigavon Council in 2022. Initial outcomes from the study suggest that there is sufficient forecast demand between Armagh and Belfast and within the local urban corridor of Portadown, Lurgan and Lisburn, and journey times will be competitive with the car. It's anticipated that the feasibility study report will be available in the coming weeks, and I will study its recommendations once I've received this.
Question 5 is withdrawn. Kate Nicholl.
Question 6, please, Mr. Speaker.
Work to upgrade the eastern footway and cycle track on Stranmillis embankment commenced on the 27th of January this year and is expected to take approximately 15 weeks. This is a sizeable investment to upgrade our existing cycling infrastructure in Belfast, with investment from my department of £580,000. I recognise the value of maintaining this route to a high standard to ensure that the facilities remain attractive to users. Is one of the most important cycling routes in Belfast, connecting the north and south of the city through Lagan Towpath, the Riverside Path and the M2 foreshore. This is one of the first schemes to benefit from new intuitive red surfacing and splayed curbs to increase safety and usable width for cycling. The footway reconstruction will also significantly improve the pavement surface for pedestrians along the route.
Ms Nicholl.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Minister, for your answer. And I'd just like to commend the officials who have been engaging with residents and community in relation to this. Without integrated infrastructure to make cycling safer and more efficient, people won't make that transition to active travel. As well as the Stranmillis embankment works, what other schemes is her department taking forward to improve cycling infrastructure in South Belfast, and how will these be connected up to make journeys safer? And I've noticed Methody students are just coming in right now, so this directly impacts them. Thank you.
The Lagmore Avenue scheme is programmed to start on site in the coming weeks. West Belfast Greenway Phase 1A is also programmed to start very soon, but sorry, I've lost my train of thought there. 2 seconds. Yeah, the joys of technology. Sorry. But is dependent on land acquisition being finalised. There are a number of other schemes where the design is substantially complete and officials are preparing traffic regulation orders for statutory consultation. Design work is ongoing for the majority of the other schemes on the short-term list within the Belfast Cycling Network delivery plan, and the public will be informed through upcoming engagement events as scheme designs progress.
Matthew O'Toole.
Speaker, and welcome to our Year 11s from Methody, as Kate said. Can I just ask, Minister, look, I welcome upgrading any cycle lane, and the Stranmillis embankment was well used, but it is an existing embankment that is well used, and we're spending scarce resources closing it down when there are other active travel opportunities in South Belfast, thinking about the additional cycle lanes in the Ravenhill Road or the Carryduff Greenway. So I suppose the question I'm asking, is this the best use of £500,000 to update what is already a very well used and popular cycle and running track when there could be other demands in the constituency? Thank you.
Minister.
Well, I think the member has potentially answered his own question, because given that it is so well used, I think it's important, and it has been surveyed that it is important to those who use it to invest in maintaining our existing pedestrian and cycling facilities to ensure that infrastructure remain safe and effective and attractive to users as we continue to encourage that behavioural shift towards walking, wheeling and cycling. As the member has alluded to, the cycle track at Stranmillis Embankment has been in place for over 25 years, and this is the first time that this level of investment has been required. The surface of the existing footway has deteriorated to the extent that sections may present difficulties to pedestrians, especially those using mobility aids or prams. Patching repairs have been carried out in the past. However, this current investment will upgrade the facilities along the route for both pedestrians and cyclists for many years to come. So I think it's a very important part of the work we do, but not to take away from the need for further new schemes, which we are committed to delivering right across the north, not just in Belfast.
Nicola Brogan.
Thank the Minister for her answers there. Does the Minister have a plan to reach the commitment to spend 10% of her transport budget on active travel?
Minister.
I'm still here. Just give me a second. So yes, I am committed to increase investment in active travel because we have to in order to meet the requirements of the Climate Change Act. In addition to the delivery of active travel projects, my department routinely invests in existing pedestrian cycling infrastructure, as has been alluded to, and work is currently ongoing to analyse the overall transport budgets and identify all areas of departmental spend where pedestrians and cyclists benefit. When this analysis is complete, it would allow my department to report a comprehensive position of overall active travel spend against the requirements of the Climate Change Act.
Jay Carl. Minister.
Public transport connects and enhances our communities, providing a convenient, flexible and accessible way to travel. The safety of our public transport workers and passengers is vitally important. Indeed, our public transport workers deserve to feel safe doing their job and should not be subjected to attacks, either verbal or physical. TransLink initially withdrew services from this area in 2018 due to an antisocial behaviour incident. They engaged with the local community and elected representatives and reintroduced services up until 6 p.m. This service was restored as it was not deemed that there was a demand for a service after 6 p.m. However, with additional housing development in the area, TransLink are now reviewing their service offering and will continue to work with the local elected representatives to extend this service into the evening.
Mr Carroll. Thank the Minister for her answer, and I think it's crucial that communities do have access to public transport. I think there is a demand in the Nagmore area and beyond for services after 6 p.m. I understand there may be a recent TransLink change in that decision in that regard, but does she agree with me that whilst worker safety and protection is paramount, can she indicate what measures her department have put in place to make sure there's public transport access but also workers are protected and safe whilst in their place of work?
Minister.
Where these incidents happen, that we continue to work with communities, with elected representatives, if there are specific areas where this is happening. TransLink will be in a better position to answer in terms of their safety for workers, in terms of loan working policies and things like that. But I'm happy to get further clarity on what policies are in place for the member and come back to you in writing.
Johnny Baker.
Would the Minister agree that it's so important that consultation happens with the community? I was a representative at the time when that bus was withdrawn back in 2016 and getting it back in 2018, and the importance of youth workers, unions, our bus drivers, TransLink themselves and community reps working hard delivers for everybody, and then going forward into the 6 p.m. will once again be another success.
Minister.
Yeah, and I think it's critically important. I suppose from the outset we want to ensure that areas aren't getting a reputation that goes before them in a negative way, and we all have a responsibility to play our part to ensure that where issues arise like this, that we work together to resolve it, but most importantly to put an end to it. No one should feel unsafe going to do their daily work, so I think that consultation and that piece of work is critically important for protecting workers, but also most importantly to ensure that the people of that area have access to the services in terms of public transport that they need and they deserve. My department has developed a draft active travel delivery plan, including draft network maps for our larger towns and cities such as Bangor, Donaghadee and Hollywood in the North Down area. Public consultation on the draft plan closed on the 28th of February, and I would like to thank everyone who took the time to respond. My officials will now review the submissions received and make any necessary amendments to the plan before submitting to me for final approval. When complete, this plan will complement the Belfast Cycling Network delivery plan to provide a firm basis for prioritising delivery of improved active travel infrastructure within our towns and cities, providing enhanced sustainable connectivity for the next 10 years and beyond. My department also works closely with councils to support them in the delivery of their greenway and active travel priorities. In the Ards and North Down Council area, funding of £6.4 million has been committed by my department to deliver greenways connecting Coimbra and Bangor to Newton Ards, and I recently attended the event marking the commencement of construction for the Newton Ards to Bangor Greenway, and my officials continue to work with their counterparts in council to finalise the design for the Newton Ards to Coimbra Greenway.
Moving on to topical questions, Kilmark Durgan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is the Minister's first topical question time. I don't think it's fair to try and trip her up with parochial concerns. However, this is an issue that I have written to her on, so it shouldn't come completely out of the blue. Could the Minister give an update on the upgrade of Caw Roundabout, please?
I thank the member for his cordial words. Yes, I recently met with officials in relation to this scheme. The upgrade and the signalisation of Caw Roundabout is responsibility of the developer, as included in the planning consent for the adjacent H30 development, and the department continues to work with the developer on this matter. On the 15th of November and the 12th of December last year, the developer submitted further information on the traffic assumptions and modelling updates. Additional design information was also received on the 17th of February this year. As I said, I met with officials on receipt of this, and it's currently being reviewed in line with the department's responsibility to protect road safety, so I hope that we'll be able to make further progress on that very soon.
Mr. Durkin.
I thank the Minister for her answer. This is a long-running issue. I've started to feel like Andy Dufresne writing for more books for Shawshank Library. Minister, I'm unaware that it was ever the case that the upgrade of the roundabout was the entire responsibility of the developer. Yes, there was a responsibility on the developer to make a financial contribution. It's my understanding that now the developer is prepared to and has made an offer to pay for the works in their entirety, and this is awaiting sign-off from the Minister. Can the Minister assure us that she will deal with this issue in an urgent fashion? Mr.
Yes, and I mean, without getting into the detail of the case, I think it's important that we do recognise that, and I think that's a very important part of this scheme. However, I have a responsibility to ensure that anything that is approved by myself or through the department meets the criteria that is required. So I understand this is a very important scheme and will lead to significant development in terms of housing in that area. So I want to ensure that whatever is approved is fit for purpose and that will not lead to further issues down the line in years to come. So, and that's not to say that I foresee that, but I think I just want the member to understand that I want to carefully consider the proposal that is put in front of me, that I can be confident in whatever decision I take.
Johnny Baker.
Cormac Canculla, and thank the Minister for answers so far. And I know we touched on it earlier on, but I'm just wondering, Minister, what projects within the Belfast Cycling Network will be taken forward this year?
Thank the member for the question. Lagmore Avenue Belfast Cycling Network scheme is programmed to start on site on the 10th of March. West Belfast Greenway Phase 1A is also programmed to start this financial year, but is dependent on the land agreement that is currently being finalised. Scheme designs are complete for Island Street and Sydenham Greenway Phase 1, and my department is preparing to commence statutory consultation on these schemes in the coming weeks. Officials are working to resolve a number of objections received during the statutory consultation for the Montgomery Road BCN scheme. Design work is ongoing for the majority of the other short-term schemes, including Ravenhill Road, North Belfast City Centre connections linking York Street train station to the Cathedral Quarter and Ulster University, Limestone Road, Cavehill Road, Durham Street linking to Belfast Grand Central Station, and Dublin Road, Botanic Avenue linking to the southern side of the city centre to Queen's University.
Mr. Baker.
Thank you, Minister. Does the Minister agree that community engagement is vital to developing cycling infrastructure?
Absolutely, and as I've said to other members through the course of today's question time, the Department is committed to ensuring that we engage with the community at every opportunity. It is important they have their input, and that we are committed to ensuring that we give people that choice to walk, wheel or cycle for many of their shorter everyday journeys, regardless of their age or their ability. And I believe that local communities are best placed to tell us what they need to help make this a reality. Stakeholder engagement is at the core of this scheme development, with the new design guidance for active travel infrastructure embedding meaningful stakeholder and community engagement throughout the design process. And there's been early engagement on a number of schemes, including the Ravenhill Road BCN scheme and the Glenavy to Crumlin active travel improvements. The views received at these events have been extremely valuable in helping our teams to shape and develop detailed design proposals.
Maurice Bradley.
Mr Speaker, I welcome the Minister to her place. Could I ask the Minister about Causeway Coast and Glens Planning Committee passed an application for 80 houses on Laurel Hill. The project needs completion of the delayed upgrade works at Strand Road and Waterside pumping stations as a matter of urgency. Can the Minister give a commitment, considering today's financial statement, to have the delayed works carried out?
Minister.
Well, without knowing the specifics in relation to that scheme, as I've said earlier on, my commitment and one of my key priorities is in terms of our wastewater infrastructure and ensuring that we deliver. So I continue to work with NI Water to progress that work. It's absolutely essential. We recognise the significant financial constraints. However, we must keep going with what we have and ensuring that we continue to deliver, be it at a slower pace than we would like. So happy to look at that in further detail. If the member wishes, I'm happy to meet with the member in relation to it. But just, I suppose, this is my approach to all of the issues in relation to wastewater, because we need to see that development progressing.
Mr Bradley.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the Minister for her answers there. But my office continues to get complaints about raw sewage along Christie Park, a park that is well used by walkers, runners and families along the banks of the River Bann. Does the Minister recognise that this is a health and safety issue as well as an infrastructure issue?
Minister.
Absolutely. I think it goes without saying. We shouldn't be seeing raw sewage on any of our public footways or areas that are well used by the public. So that is essentially, you've just reiterated the real the need to progress this much quicker. The reality is the funding isn't there, but that doesn't mean that we stand still. We have to keep going. So I'm continuing to work with executive colleagues to look at other natural drainage solutions, and also in terms of the water and sustainable drainage bill that I will be bringing forward, and also we're looking at developer contributions, which, whilst none is a silver bullet in isolation, we are committed to looking at all solutions to help move this forward.
Stephen Dunn.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Minister, your department published a review of the part-time 20-mile-per-hour zones outside schools back in November, which recommended a further rollout of the scheme, and your predecessor advised that a further rollout was being positively considered. I'd appreciate if you could please update me on any update on progress on getting that rolled out further.
Sure.
Yeah, I thank the member for raising this issue. It's something that I have been very strongly lobbying for in my time prior to becoming the Minister for the Department. So like my predecessor, this is a piece of work that I'm very keen to see rolled out where possible. I met with officials just at the end of last week to look at the review and see where we go next. There's a few questions I want to ask in relation to that about how we can progress this further and what our limits are potentially in relation to that. But I'm hoping to be able to make an announcement in the near future in relation to that also.
Mr Dunn.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and thank the Minister for her answer. And I think there is certainly a lot of positive feedback from the review, and I know locally within my own area it has been well received by parents and staff within their schools. Just, I suppose, to press further in terms of time frames, are you confident of more rollout within this incoming financial year?
Minister.
Yes, I would hope to see that in the fairly near future. I suppose we'll keep members of the committee updated as well. As I said, road safety is a huge priority. We are seeing the highest number of deaths on our roads, and sadly many of them are now pedestrians. So it's incumbent on all of us to do what we can to ensure that we are reducing those numbers as far down as possible, ideally to zero. We don't want to see anybody losing their lives on the road. So for me, this is a very important scheme. It's about protecting our children going to and from schools. It's protecting people in residential areas. And I'm considering this very, very seriously, but I want to ensure that we're getting the maximum benefit from whatever I announce next. So considering at the minute, but hope to be able to announce something fairly soon.
Question 5 withdrawn. Gemma Dolan.
Garmioga Cancorlia, and I welcome the Minister to her place. Minister, what's your assessment of the impact that the temporary exemption certificates will have on the MOT waiting times?
In each of the last 3 years, the Driver Vehicle Agency conducted over 1.1 million vehicle tests, which are the highest numbers ever recorded. In June last year, my predecessor, Minister O'Dowd, introduced temporary exemption certificates for 5- and 7-year-old cars within specified date ranges. This measure, along with the high number of vehicle tests conducted, means the average waiting time for an MOT test has fallen from over 100 days at the end of May 2024 to approximately 30 days in February 2025. In 2024, there were only 6 days in the year when the DVA did not offer MOT appointments. Disappointingly, on average, around 800 vehicle test appointments are missed each week due to no-shows, placing additional demand on the service. And I think it's very important that at this point I offer my gratitude to all of our staff in our MOT centres, because without the Trojan effort of workers right across the north, we would not see that reduction in waiting times, and it's been very important. I know certainly all of our constituency office will have been lobbied heavily on that.
Linda Dillon. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Minister. And yeah, constituency offices have been lobbied heavily on that. Do you expect that biennial MOT testing could ensure a permanent reduction in waiting times?
I can advise that the biennial MOT testing consultation presents a number of options for testing, as well as considering road safety, environmental impact, insurance premiums and the potential impact on the local automotive industry. In considering the way forward for vehicle testing, I will factor the responses from the public and key stakeholders on these important issues, and also the operational impact of the opening of 2 new test centres. And I can advise that the 2 new centres will provide the capacity to test over 200,000 additional vehicles per annum, which will help the DVA meet the future demand for this service.
Linda Dillon.
Sure. And thank the Minister, and want to welcome you to your first question time here today. Minister, can you outline what engagement you have had with the Irish Government in relation to the A5 project, please?
Well, I suppose just to reiterate again, in terms of the A5, I am working at the pace really hard to ensure that this is delivered. We must ensure that the A5 is delivered at the earliest possible stage, and with that I have been having regular liaisons, and as of my officials, with our counterparts in the south of Ireland in relation to this critical project. As recent as last week at the North-South Ministerial Council meeting, officials met with their counterparts in the Department of Transport, and I myself had discussions with Minister O'Brien in relation to this. So I'm committed to ensuring that we continue to move ahead with this as quickly as possible.
Ms Dillon.
Minister, obviously you know that I have very personal reasons for having an interest in the A5 and how it is progressed. Do you know when you expect to receive a judgment following the hearing?
Yeah, and I think, like the member and many others, particularly in the area that the A5 serves, there are so many families who have been impacted in this way. So I'm very cognizant of that, and hope that we see a conclusion to the current legal case at the earliest possible stage. It's listed for hearing in the High Court on the 18th of March, with an expected time frame of 3 consecutive days. And whilst there's no defined time frame for handing down of the court's decision following the hearing, the court has previously indicated that the importance of getting this case dealt with as quickly as possible. So I hope that that will also be in the not too distant future.
Can the Minister tell us what impact the £19.5 million October monitoring allocation has had to NI Water has had on housing in West Belfast?
Of the £19.5 million additional money provided to NI Water during October monitoring, £7 million has been allocated to addressing wastewater constraints in the Upper Falls area of West Belfast. This investment will facilitate the progression of 7 new housing developments comprising of around 1,200 homes, as well as 5 commercial units. The connection of these new homes to NI Water's wastewater infrastructure will be subject to the completion of the capital works in the Upper Falls area by NI Water and the delivery of stormwater offsetting solutions by developers. Targeted investment such as this will help to contribute to the delivery of the aims and objectives of the Executive's housing supply.
Shane.
Would the Minister agree with me that the Department and NI Water should be working closely together to prioritise unlocking more housing connections in West Belfast?
Absolutely, and one of the first engagements I had when I came into post was with NI Water, Chief Executive and the Chair, because it is certainly very important to me that we work closely together to address the wastewater constraints. We have a shared aim in achieving that, and this will undoubtedly help to facilitate new housing connections in West Belfast and right across the north. By working together, it enables us to focus any additional investment on where it is most needed. And we have seen how that has happened in relation to the most recent October monitoring round, where we were able to target wastewater constraints and facilitate connections for those housing developments I've mentioned. This additional investment is projected to deliver capacity for over 2,300 new properties overall, and to connect to the infrastructure during this price control period. In addition, my officials are also working collaboratively with colleagues in DAERA and DFC to contribute to the aims and objectives of the Executive's housing supply strategy.
That brings to a conclusion. Question time. Point of order, Mr. Shane.
I attended